August 1973. The same summer America learned the word Watergate, its purest sporting event, a downhill race for children, was about to be caught cheating. The cheat was invisible at the finish line because it was hiding at the starting gate. And the magnet is not even why the race died. Let's go back and see it. What you're seeing is not a recreation. This is the actual film. Akron, Ohio, 1936, a blimp circling over the hill. Nearly 100,000 people packed around a strip of asphalt and racing down the middle of it. Children in cars they built themselves, powered by nothing but gravity. No engines, no motors, just a boy, a box, and a hill. And this is a real photograph. The All-American Soap Box Derby, the race that called itself the greatest amateur sporting event in the world. Movie stars flew in for this. Radio carried it coast to coast. And in August of 1973, on that same hill in Akron, a 14-year-old boy crossed the finish line first and detonated the most famous cheating scandal in the history of children's sports. This is the story of the race America believed was too innocent to fix, and the hidden magnet that proved it wasn't. To understand why this scandal hurt so much, you have to understand what the Derby meant. 1933, Dayton, Ohio, in the depths of the Great Depression. A newspaper photographer named Myron Scott sees a group of boys racing homemade cars down a hill, cars hammered together from soap crates, buggy wheels, and scrap. He organizes a real race. 362 kids show up. Within a year, Chevrolet signs on as national sponsor, and tens of thousands of spectators are lining the course. By 1936, the race has its own purpose-built stadium in Akron, Derby Downs, carved out by Depression-era work crews in just 3 weeks. And then it becomes an institution. Every summer, champions from hundreds of local races across America and beyond roll into Akron. Radio carries it coast to coast. Newsreels run it in every theater. Jimmy Stewart shows up 6 times. He called it the most magnificent spectacle he'd ever seen. The rules were the whole point. Every boy builds his own car. No engines, no money, no help from dad. Gravity was supposed to be the only sponsor that mattered. For 40 years, that was the promise. Then, in the fall of 1972, something happened that almost nobody in the grandstands noticed, and it mattered more than any magnet. Jimmy Gronen was 14, and his childhood had already collapsed once. His father died when he was 8. When his mother was hospitalized with a long-term illness, the family scattered, and in 1972, Jimmy was sent to Boulder, Colorado, to live with his aunt and his uncle. The uncle was not an ordinary guardian. Robert Lange was a Harvard-educated engineer and a self-made millionaire, the man who invented the plastic ski boot that carries his name to this day. And in the Lange house, the soapbox derby was not a hobby. It was the family franchise. Just 1 year earlier, in 1972, Jimmy's cousin Bobby Lange had won the All-American Soapbox Derby, the national championship itself. Now it was Jimmy's turn. His car was a sleek fiberglass wedge, reportedly refined in a wind tunnel at Caltech. Officially, of course, the boy built it himself, the rules said so. 3 months after touching his first Derby car, Jimmy Gronen won the Boulder qualifier. He was going to Akron with the family name to defend. And inside the nose of his sleek black racer, car number 12, Boulder, Colorado, painted proudly down the side, there was something the rulebook had never even thought to ban. August 19, 1973. The 36th All-American Soapbox Derby. 138 champions, ages 11 to 15 from all over the country. On paper, it was tradition as usual. In reality, the Derby was running on borrowed time. Chevrolet, the sponsor that had bankrolled it for 4 decades, had already announced it was walking away, and this year's prize money was its parting gift. The grandstands didn't know that. They were watching the hill. Heat after heat, one car kept doing something strange at the starting gate. When the steel flap dropped, most cars eased forward, gathering speed gram by gram. One car, Jimmy Gronen's car, seemed to leap. Observers described it as a lurch, as if the car were being pulled downhill by an invisible hand. He won his heats. He won the final, clearly ahead. 14-year-old Jimmy Gronen was the All-American champion with the trophy, the $7,500 scholarship, and the cameras. But in the stands, people had been watching that starting gate with narrowed eyes. Some of them had cameras of their own, and by the time the champion's photo was taken, spectators were already handing race officials the evidence that would take it all away. Protests reached the Derby's control board within hours. There was a pattern officials noticed later. Gronen's car was actually getting slower with every heat, as if something inside it was running out. The board ordered the car examined. Then they went further. They took it to an aerospace lab and put it under an X-ray. The image showed everything. Buried in the fiberglass nose, an electromagnet wired to a battery pack. The trigger was hidden in the headrest. When Jimmy pressed his helmet back, the nose of the car became a magnet. And here is the elegant, terrible part. The starting gate at Derby Downs was a steel flap that dropped forward. An electromagnet in the nose meant the car was pulled into the falling gate, a stolen head start on a hill where races are decided by hundredths of a second. Slower every heat. The battery was draining. 2 days after the race, the Derby did what it had never done in 36 years. It stripped its champion. The car was dismantled in front of the press, wire by wire. Second place Brent Yarborough of Elk Grove, California was declared the real champion. And a 14-year-old boy who had already lost his father, then his mother, then his home, now heard Walter Cronkite reportedly describe him on the evening news as the one little boy in America unhappier than Richard Nixon. The country wanted a villain. What the investigation found instead was much worse. Because here's the myth. One boy, one magnet, one rotten apple in a barrel of innocence. That is not what the investigators found. When officials tore into the rest of the field, they found that at least 30 of the cars, nearly a quarter of the race, had illegal axles or other violations. The boy-built car, the entire moral core of the Derby, had quietly become a fiction. And everyone on that hill had a pretty good idea whose hands were really shaping the fastest cars. Jimmy's uncle never really denied the magnet. His defense was more damning than a denial. Everyone was doing it, he said. The Derby was corrupt before we arrived. Jimmy himself would say the same thing decades later. In Boulder, the district attorney charged Robert Lange with contributing to the delinquency of a minor, a millionaire prosecuted over a children's race. He settled $2,000 to the Boys Club of Boulder and a public apology. An Ohio prosecutor summed up how America felt in the language of 1973. It's like discovering your ivory snow girl has made a blue movie. And remember the timing. This was the summer of the Watergate hearings. The summer Americans watched their president's men admit to cheating, live on television, channel after channel. Then they turned to the sports page and found out even the soapbox race was rigged. But here's the fact that breaks the myth wide open. The Derby's death sentence had been signed a year before the race. Chevrolet, the money, the machinery, the national prestige, announced its exit in September of '72, long before anyone x-rayed anything. The magnet didn't kill a healthy institution. It exposed a dying one. The next summer told the truth. 1974, 99 cars showed up to Akron, down from 138. The Akron Chamber of Commerce walked away. The radio networks were long gone. The newsreels had died with the 50s. A local electronics company eventually stepped in and kept the race alive, and the starting gates were rebuilt so that no magnet could ever grab them again. The All-American soap box Derby still runs today, every summer. At Derby Downs, hundreds of kids, real gravity, tighter rules. But the 70,000-strong crowds, the movie stars, the coast-to-coast broadcasts, that Derby never came back. As for Jimmy Gronen, he reportedly took a hacksaw to his trophy and threw the pieces into a Wisconsin lake. He grew up, stayed out of the spotlight, and spent part of his life helping troubled kids find mentors. The scandal, he said years later, was in the end a real blessing to me. The magnet that pulled his car into the gate pulled the whole myth down with it. The myth that somewhere in America there was still one race too pure to fix. If you remember an event, a race, or a tradition that quietly vanished, tell me in the comments. That's where the next story comes from. I'm Vanishing Era.